out here, Florida looks different. The moon hangs low over the sawgrass. The air sticks to your ribs. And every noise echoes further than it should. You can stand in the middle of a trail, miles from the nearest porch light, and feel like something is watching you. Something small. Something quick. Something that knows these woods far better than you ever will. Old-timers used to warn their kids not to wander off after dark. Not because of panthers, not because of hogs, but because of them, the children of the swamp. The little ones with the wrong faces, who move just out of sight and whisper where no one should be whispering. Some say they're feral, some say they're cursed, some say they're the last descendants of a tragedy Florida tried to forget. But everyone down here, everyone who lives near the deep woods, knows the same thing. If you hear rustling behind you, don't turn around. If you see eyes shine low to the ground, don't move. And if you ever catch a small, pale shape staring at you from the tree line, just walk away. Because the Squallies don't like being seen. And if you see one, that means it already saw you first. This is the legend Florida tells only after the sun goes down. This is the story of the Squallies. Welcome back to Greetings from Florida. I'm your host, Joe Torino, and tonight we're heading off the paved roads and into the deep heart of Florida folklore. This is episode 15, Children of the Swamp, the legend of the Squallies. Some cryptids roar. Some lurk. Some leave tracks you can cast in plaster. But the Squallies, they whisper. They hide. They watch just beyond the tree line, close enough to hear you breathe. In the backwoods of Collier, Hendry, Glades, even as far north as Ocala, the stories always sound the same. Small figures in the brush, pig-snouted or half-human, pale as moonlight, slipping between the trees without a sound. They're called Squallies, a piece of Florida folklore that's part urban legend, part backwoods horror, and part something older. So let's go back, way back, to where the legend first took root. If you want to understand the Squallies, you have to understand Florida the way it used to be. Not highways, not gated communities, just swamp and sky forever. Before airboats, before land developers carved roads into the wetlands, this state was a living maze. Sawgrass plains stretching farther than the eye could see, blackwater creeks curling through cypress forest, and islands of oak hammock rising from the muck like ancient fortresses. It was in a place like these, the forgotten edges of the Everglades, where the earliest stories of the little people of the swamp began. To the Seminole and Miccosukee, Florida's swamps were not empty. They were alive, sacred, guarded. Some of the oldest stories speak of Este Capati, the hidden ones. Small figures glimpsed in the corner of vision, moving between the palmettos with impossible silence. Not evil, not good, just watching. They weren't described as monsters. They were guardians, tricksters, children of the land itself. But the warnings were always the same. Don't wander alone. Don't follow the little footprints. And never, ever call out to what calls to you first. When the Spanish pushed into Florida in the 1500s, they expected gold and hostile tribes. Juan Ponce de Leon's men wrote of child-sized figures slipping between the trees near freshwater springs. Hernando de Soto's chroniclers mentioned forest dwarves who fled when approached, leaving only strange prints in the mud. Were these encounters literal, misinterpretations, or early echoes of a legend that would take on a new name centuries later? No one knows, but one thing is certain. Florida's earliest Europeans feared the swamp, not because of its size, but because of what moved inside it. Now here's where things get strange, because depending on who you ask, the Squallies aren't just one thing. In the oldest stories, they were small, fast, silent, 3 to 4 feet tall, wiry, with limbs just a little too long for comfort, eyes that reflected yellow or red in lantern light, skin pale, almost chalky, like something that didn't see much sun. But as the folklore evolved, they changed. In Collier and Hendry County, they appeared more human, but twisted. Little hunched, broad shoulders, face flattened into pig-like snouts. A trait locals whispered came from generations of isolation or something darker. In the northern swamps near Ocala and the Withlacoochee, they were described as feral, barefoot, hair hanging in mats, moving low to the ground like animals. And from the early pioneer diaries, one recurring line: small figures in the tree line, watching us. By the 1800s, when Florida crackers herded cattle through the wild interior, the stories spread like smoke. Cattlemen spoke of swamp children, pale, silent, always seen in pairs. Loggers near Fakahatchee swore something followed them through the trees. And families living on the edge of the big cypress would lock their doors at sundown. This wasn't the skunk ape, wasn't Bigfoot. This was something smaller, closer, quieter. Something that watched from the palmettos and knew the swamp better than any human ever would. The word Squallies didn't appear until much later, sometime in the mid-20th century. The name likely grew out of slang used by trappers and hunters, and then spread to teenagers and backroad communities. It became the catch-all term for the strange, small figures people saw sprinting across dirt roads, darting behind cabbage palms, or crouching near culverts after dark. Children of the swamp, little people, pigmen, lost ones. Florida folklore finally had a name for them. And whether they were spirits, outcasts, or something else, people insisted they were real. If the roots of the Squallies reach back to old Florida, to tribes, the settlers, the frontier families, the modern legend took shape much later. Not in oral tradition, but in real estate. In the 1960s, two brothers, Leonard and Julius Rosen, rolled into Southwest Florida with a promise: a new paradise carved out of the Everglades, Golden Gate Estates. They drained wetlands, built roads, and sold thousands of lots to northerners through glossy brochures. Land of sunshine, acreage, a dream. But the dream was a lie. Much of the land was unbuildable. Too wet, too wild, too far from anything. People bought plots they never saw. Roads led nowhere. Whole neighborhoods existed only on paper. Decades later, the state bought much of the ruined development to restore it to the swamp it always was. And it's here, in these broken grids of asphalt, overgrown canals, and silent cul-de-sacs, where the Squallies legend as we know it truly took form. Once the land scam collapsed, Golden Gate Estates became something else entirely. A patchwork of forgotten roads and isolated trailers, miles apart. People who lived out there learned quickly the swamp comes back fast. And the stories came back with it. Hunters reported small figures crossing the road in their headlights. 3, maybe 4 feet tall. Hair long and tangled, shoulders hunched. One man swore he saw a face flash in the beam of his flashlight. Pale skin, flattened nose, wide eyes reflecting red. They were always described the same way. Quick, quiet, human, but not quite. People began calling them the Squallies. Nobody remembers who said it first, but by the early 1980s, everyone in Collier County had heard the name. By the late 20th century, the Squallies weren't just folklore. They were a dare. Teenagers from Naples and Marco Island would pile into pickups and drive deep into the undeveloped parts of Golden Gate Estates with flashlights and cheap beer. They'd park by old canals, walk down dirt paths choked with vines, and swear they heard footsteps keeping in pace with them, even when no one else was there. Sightings spread. A pale figure crouched behind a sable palm, a small shape darting across a driveway, faces watching from tree lines. Most nights, nothing happened. But every so often, someone came back shaken, convinced something had followed them home. In 2011, the legend became police record. A man in Golden Gate Estates wrecked his motorcycle on Oil Well Road. When officers arrived, he wasn't drunk, he wasn't high, but he was terrified. He told them a boogeyman had ran out in front of him, short, pale, pig-faced. And when he hit the ground, he swore something pinned him down. Something small, strong, human-shaped. Florida Highway Patrol chalked it up to shock. Locals chalked it up to Squallies. As the years went on, Squallies became more than a Naples ghost story. Sightings started popping up across the inland counties: Henry, Glades, Highlands, even pockets of Marion. Anywhere the swamp pressed up against the back door of rural homes, people reported the same thing. Short figures, pig-like faces, human movements, always watching. Were they real? Or had the legend grown legs of its own? In Florida, legends tend to do that. But sightings are only one part of this legend. To understand the Squallies, what they are, what they want, and why people fear them, we need to look at their nature, how they move, where they hide, and why they've survived in the shadows for so long. Next, the modern folklore of the Squallies, their behavior, their instincts, and the unsettling patterns behind the sightings. To understand why the Squallies legend has lasted this long, why it keeps showing up in counties miles apart, you have to look past the sightings, past the stories, into the patterns behind them. Squallies are almost never seen in open spaces. They hug the edges, the fringe, the borderlands between human and wild. They move where the canopy is low, where the ground is soft, where headlights don't reach. Golden Gate Estates is the epicenter, but the pattern radiates outward like water rings. North into Immokalee farmland, east into Big Cypress and the Fakahatchee Strand, even as far as the Caloosahatchee River Basin. It's like they follow the oldest paths, the foot trails, the game trails, the forgotten routes worn into the earth long before Florida had roads. If the Squallies are real, or if the legend is based on something real, then their movements follow rules. 1. They avoid light. Every sighting happens at night, dusk, or deep shadow. No full sun encounters. Light sends them running. 2. They travel in small groups. Almost no account describes a lone squally. Most mention 2, 3, sometimes 4. Always close together, always watching. 3. They circle before approaching. Hunters say you'll hear footsteps behind you, then to your left, then suddenly in front. A slow, tightening ring. 4. They mimic sounds. This one turns up in the most rural accounts. Strange whistles, soft tapping on metal blinds, or a wet cough from the tree line. 5. They don't like dogs. More than one encounter ends the same way. The dog goes silent, then starts shaking. Not barking, shaking. Across all the stories, 3 instincts show up again and again, and they're the reason people are still scared to walk alone in these woods. 1. Curiosity without fear. Squallies watch humans from inches away sometimes. They crouch behind palmettos and peek through the fronds. They follow hikers for a mile without making a sound. They stand just beyond the glow of a campfire, but they rarely attack. Their instinct seems to be to observe, not strike. 2. Territorial behavior. When they feel threatened, or if someone wanders too far off a trail, the tone changes. People hear rocks tossed from the dark, branches breaking deliberately, soft growls that don't match any known animal, and sometimes a warning, a shape rushing the tree line, stopping just short of the light. That's the moment that makes people run. 3. Protective patterns. This part is unsettling. Some sightings suggest squallies protect something. A location, a structure, an old clearing, a place they don't want disturbed. Sightings cluster around abandoned homesteads, collapsed hunting shacks, patches of land grown in strange, deliberate ways, old Seminole ceremonial mounds, and sites where locals swear a building once stood, even though the county has no record of it. They act like guardians, not predators. If you collect all the descriptions, all the encounters, all the lore, the squallies aren't monsters. There's something between. Not quite human, not quite beast, but shaped by the swamp itself. Small, fast, silent, adaptive. A people who survive by not being seen. But legends don't survive on description alone. They survive on stories. The encounters passed down from one fire pit to another. And there are more of those than you think. Next, we're stepping deeper into the sightings themselves. The places people swear they saw squallies, and the ones who walked away shaken. You can't tell a legend from a campfire story until you follow the sightings. The places where the details line up, where the same descriptions echo across decades and counties. And when it comes to the squallies, the sightings stretch farther than Naples, farther than Golden Gate Estates. Old Florida families will tell you the squallies have been watching from the tree line for a long time. This is the heartland of the legend. Miles of paved promises turned to wilderness. Roads that end in vines, houses built in the middle of nowhere, silence thick as mud. And it's here, in the dead ends and drainage canals, where the most documented encounters live. A hunter south of 26th Avenue Southeast swears he saw two figures crouched inside a palmetto tunnel, short, barefoot, eyes reflecting the flashlight like an animal, except the eyes weren't set forward like a person. When he shined the light fully, the two figures split, one left, one right, moving faster than a human in the brush that thick should move. Everyone who grew up around here knows the story of the abandoned lab, DeSoto Boulevard and Oil Well Road, a place that doesn't show up on any map anymore. Half-buried foundations, a metal door on the ground that won't open, rumors of experiments. Men who went exploring swear they saw shapes watching from the tree line, faces with wide nostrils, shoulders hunched low, a group of them, silent. They left before they found out how many there were. Past Naples, east towards Big Cypress, the encounters get older and stranger. A pair of brothers in the 1980s were asleep in their elevated blind when something tapped on the ladder. Not climbed, tapped. Slow, deliberate, and high up. When they looked down, they saw three shapes around the base. Small, hunched, heads tilted upward. They said the creatures didn't run. They just slipped sideways into the brush, like shadows peeling off a wall. A woman driving Jane's Scenic Drive at dusk said something crossed the road on all fours, but not like an animal. It crawled like a person, she said. Arms and legs, but the head looked wrong. She refused to describe the face on record. Just said she wouldn't drive that road at night ever again. Long before the estates existed, long before Collier County had roads, the Spanish wrote about something out there too. In a 1743 mission log, a Jesuit missionary mentions small forest people who watched them from the cypress stands. He called them los pequeños deformes, the deformed little ones. And the Calusa? Their oral tradition spoke of forest children whose faces were not fully human, guardians of sacred places, silent watchers. This isn't new. Golden Gate Estates didn't invent this fear. It just gave it a new address. On Marco Island, a fishing guide told a story passed down from his grandfather. A strange camp found deep in the mangroves during the 1940s. Small huts made of mangrove roots, bones scattered, a carved stick figure with a snout-like mask. He said when the men returned a week later, The camp was gone, every trace washed away except a single footprint in the mud, three-toed, but shaped like a human heel. There's an inland triangle from Immokalee to Ave Maria to Lehigh Acres where sightings spike during drought years. Farmers swear they've seen small figures watching from irrigation ditches. Night shift workers hear something run between equipment sheds. Kids talk about things pacing the tree line behind rural schools. And deputies, off the record, admit they've responded to prowler calls where the prints were too small for a man, too human for an animal, and too deep for a child. Some encounters go beyond sightings. These are the ones that make people whisper. The ones they share only with family. A group of teens camping off Miller Boulevard woke at 3 a.m. to find small footprints circling their tents, over and over, stamped into the sand. When they looked at the tree line, they saw three silhouettes crouched low, watching, rocking, but not attacking. They left everything behind: the tents, the cooler, the firewood, and drove out without speaking. A woman in a trailer along Randall Boulevard told her daughter she heard tapping on her bedroom window 3 nights in a row. Soft, almost polite, like a child asking to come in. When she finally looked, she saw a face with a pig-like nose staring back, inches away. She moved out the next day. The single most unnerving report came from a man who lived on a canal near DeSoto Boulevard. He said something followed him while he was walking his dog. Close, but silent. When he shined his light across the canal, he saw a group of 4 or 5 shapes on the other bank, low to the ground, heads tilted in unison, just watching. He said they didn't blink. So what are we looking at here? Monsters? People? Something else Florida grew on its own? What explains the faces in the brush? The footprints? The history that won't stay buried? Next, we explore the theories, not the cartoon ones, but the ones Floridians whisper when the night feels too still. When you gather the sightings and the rumors and the centuries of whispers, you're left with the question that everyone asks, but no one agrees on. What are the Squallies? Some say they're human. Some say they're not. Some say they used to be something else entirely. The truth is murky, like all things born in the swamp. Cracker families have been living deep in the Florida backwoods since the 1800s. Some settled miles from towns, raising cattle and surviving hurricanes in makeshift camps. But not all of them stayed connected to the world. Florida has stories, quiet ones, of families who went bush, disappearing into the interior of big cypress or the mangroves for generations, cut off from society, no schools, no doctors, no outside contact. And when gene pools collapse, faces change, bodies adapt, isolation takes its toll. Some folklorists think the Squallies are descendants of those forgotten Floridians. Not monsters, not cryptids, just people lost to time and shaped by it. The idea hurts more than it scares, which is why this theory is one many locals whisper, but refuse to talk about on record. You can't understand Florida without respecting what the land can do. Hard water, bad wells, toxic algae, old pesticides buried under orange groves. Even the soil around Golden Gate Estates has chemicals left over from abandoned development. Some believe the Squallies are what happens when people, or animals, live generations in a place full of natural and man-made poisons. The pig-like features, the small size, the pale skin in people who rarely see the sun. Not supernatural, not spiritual, just mutations, a harsh biological response to a harsh land. It's not the most glamorous theory, but it's one of the most Florida ones. Then there's the one people either love or refuse to entertain. The stories about a laboratory hidden in the estates, a research facility no agency will claim, a place where something happened. Old-timers swear it existed. A concrete foundation, medical waste, strange doors half buried in mud. And every few years, someone says they saw workers clearing the area in the middle of the night. If you believe this theory, the Squallies weren't born. They were made. A project, a mistake, an experiment dumped into the swamp like old trash. A few eyewitnesses even say the creatures have surgical scars. This theory is dramatic, wild, easy to dismiss. But the ones who believe it, they don't laugh. They lower their voices. Long before the Spanish arrived, the Calusa and the Seminole had stories of small forest beings, guardians of sacred places, faces not quite human, voices like children, feet that made almost no sound. They weren't evil, just territorial. And if you crossed into their ground, you'd feel it. This theory says the Squallies aren't people at all, but the modern echo of something spiritual. An old Florida presence wearing whatever shape it needs to be seen. The sightings aren't creatures. They're guardians. The pig face isn't literal. It's symbolic. Distorted by fear, distance, and folklore. And honestly, the Everglades feels old enough and alive enough for this theory to make sense. And then there's one theory people don't like to say out loud. The theory that feels true, even if it isn't pretty. That Florida, especially wild Florida, has always had a way of hiding things. People disappear in the swamp every year. Animals evolve strange shapes. Old communities rise and fall. The forest swallows entire towns if you let it. This theory says the Squallies aren't one thing. They're many things. Lost children, mutated families, strays who ran into the swamp and never came back, animals that learned to stand upright, spirits that mimic the forms of people, or something in between. It's not a single creature. It's Florida's ability to swallow people whole and give them back changed. And when you look at the sightings, the descriptions, the centuries of stories, that theory feels less folklore and more like a warning. So what do we do with a legend like this? One that spans cultures, centuries, counties, and generations. One that lived longer than any newspaper story and survived more hurricanes than we could count. In the next segment, we leave the theories behind and step back into the real Florida. The trails, the roads, the silence, the places where the Squallies are supposed to live. And we ask the final question: what does it feel like to go there today? Here's the thing about Squallies. You can't understand the legend from a screen or a story. You have to stand in the places where the whispers began. So let's go there. Drive through Golden Gate Estates just after sunrise and you'll see it. Miles of empty lots, half-built dreams swallowed by sawgrass and shadow. To outsiders, it's just undeveloped lands. To locals, these back roads are the spine of the legend. You'll find street signs that go nowhere, driveways reclaimed by moss, concrete slabs hidden under vines. And sometimes you feel it. That sensation of being observed. The weight of a stare you can't place. Not dangerous, not hostile, just aware. Head east into Big Cypress and the world changes. The canopy closes overhead, the air thickens, the forest gets darker even when the sun is out. This is where rangers, hunters, and hikers have had the most moments. Sawgrass that's been pressed down into narrow paths as if something small and bipedal passed through. Tracks that look almost human, but too wide, too flat. Branches broken 4 feet off the ground. Dragging marks in the mud, soft chittering noises that don't match any known animal. This is the Florida that keeps secrets and gives warnings. If you want to understand the legend, you have to be here at night. The woods around Marco Island, the mangroves near Goodland, empty lots toward Oil Well Road, even the forgotten trails behind DeSoto Boulevard. At night, these places feel different, alive, alert. You hear movement in the cabbage palms. You see pale shapes dart between the trees. You catch child-sized silhouettes crouched along the ditch line. And before you tell yourself it's nothing, that old Florida instinct kicks in. The primitive, biological one that says, something is out there. And maybe it is. Ask old-timers in Naples, Goodland, Marco, or Immokalee, and you'll get one of two reactions. Either a chuckle and a quick change of subject, or a stare, long and heavy, like you've mentioned something you shouldn't. Most won't talk, some will, and the ones who do say the same thing. The woods ain't empty. There are things that live out there. You don't mess with them, and they won't mess with you. They've been here longer than we have. Is that folklore or eyewitness truth? In Florida, those lines blur. If the Squallies were just a Naples story, they'd be easy to dismiss. But their shadows reach farther. From the St. Johns River to the Panhandle, from inland cattle trails to coastal mangroves, from Seminole tales to Spanish journals. A legend this widespread doesn't survive because it's entertaining. It survives because people keep seeing things that fit the description. Short silhouettes, pig faces, child-sized bodies, strange vocalizations, eyes shining from the palmettos. Across 400 years of Florida history, the details barely change. And that's what makes the legend hard to ignore. So let's come back to the present. Out of the swamp, out of the stories, back onto the road. Florida's wildlands are ancient, beautiful, and dangerous. They hold history, memory, and mystery in equal measure. Are the Squallies out there? Something is. Maybe human, maybe animal, maybe spirit, maybe something in between. But the deeper truth is this. Every legend says something about the place that created it. And the Squallies? They remind us that Florida is still wild, still unsettled, still capable of secrets. Maybe they're long gone. Maybe they moved deeper into the swamp. Or maybe, when the night is thick and the wind is still, they're closer than anyone realizes. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. Somewhere between history and the dark. Mystery makes Florida what it is, and the stories we tell about the land say as much about us as they do about what may be out there. Florida's stories run deep, in the soil, in the water, in the wind between the palmettos. And the Squallies are one of those legends that refuse to stay buried. Whether they were forgotten families, wandering spirits, experiments, or something stranger, their story says something about this place we call home. A place where the line between history and folklore is a lot thinner than most people realize. And if you ever find yourself on a quiet back road after sundown, or walking a trail where the trees seem too still, just remember, Florida's wild places have long memories, and sometimes they watch back. Greetings from Florida is written, researched, and narrated by me, Joe Torino. Sound design and production by yours truly, with original theme music by Modern Mimes. You can find more stories, photos, and episode extras at @FloridaPod on Instagram, and visit FloridaPod.com for links to listen on any platform, plus the official merch store. And if you like what you hear, share the show, leave a review, or tell a friend who loves a little weird with their history. And as always, stay weird, Florida. We'll see you next time.